Hi everyone, welcome back to Aspergers from the Inside. You're here with Paul. Today's Patron's Choice video is small talk is a death sentence. So maybe you felt like that from time to time. So today we're talking about why is it so hard? Why is small talk so hard? Why does it literally feel like part of you inside is dying due to lack of oxygen or lack of interest? I actually think it is possible to die of boredom. Brené Brown says that unused creativity is not benign, and when we hold ourselves back, it's almost like we're not letting ourselves out, not letting ourselves grow, and that feels like dying. So I don't think it's much of an exaggeration to call small talk a death sentence. So there are a couple of aspects to this for me personally, and I'm interested to hear if you feel similarly that this resonates with your experience. But for me, one of the reasons it's so hard is because it just feels fake. It feels extremely superficial. It feels like going through the motions, almost like lying, almost like I'm saying this thing, but I'm not really believing it. So if I am to pretend to be interested in someone, or if I'm going to give the stock standard answers to the common questions, how are you? What do you do for work? How's the weather today? All of those things, I feel almost as if I'm betraying myself somehow because it's not me to say these things. I have much, much, much more interesting answers that I could say, but instead of that, I'm going to restrict myself, put myself in this little tiny box where I'm not allowed to get out, not allowed to grow or thrive or anything like that, and just stick with the stock standard answers. And what I found with my experimentation on people in the past is that I've been looking for ways to break out of that box in a way that other people are going to respond positively to. And I found that there's a couple of ways that others do not respond positively to. And so I used to try and break out of that cycle as quickly as possible. So I might use a question like, what's your superpower? Or something completely out of the box like that. And what I found is that other people get really freaked out when I did that. So they were expecting a script. They were expecting this kind of socially appropriate dance. I do this, you do this, I do this, you do this. And it's a bit of a ritual. It's a bit of a sequence. They know what to expect. And when I broke out of that, they did not know what to do. The image that comes to mind for me is like someone, like an actor standing on stage, and the other person suddenly starts improvising, like, that's not your line. You're supposed to say this, and then I'm supposed to say this. This is what we rehearsed. Remember? Look at the huge audience that's looking at us. I don't know what to do now because you've thrown me off, because you've gone off script. So I think that's part of the reason it's so difficult for me personally, is because I don't like scripts unless I have to, right? They say that scripting is an autistic behavior, but it's quite interesting that in the realm of casual small talk, it's the neurotypical population that hold on to this socially appropriate script much, much, much more tightly. So it's quite common that autistic people much prefer to connect in an interesting way, and that without that connection, without a shared interest or some kind of energy or passion or something to connect on, then the relationship isn't really all that fulfilling. In fact, the relationship often feels like I'm doing this for you and I'm not getting anything out of it. And I'm just trying to keep up with the small talk for as long as I need to, until eventually this conversation, and I'm gambling on this, eventually this conversation might get into some interesting territory where I will have some rewarding social interaction with you. For me, it feels as though there's a person in front of me, a really interesting, fantastic person that I haven't met yet and I don't know much about, and I'm really keen to get to know them and to understand who they are and what they like and what makes them tick, and engage with this person in an interesting collaborative way. And when we stick to what feels to me to be the most mundane of interactions imaginable, it feels like I'm cheated almost, because why can't we go out and play? We're stuck inside, and we're not actually interacting on an interesting level. So there are a couple of ways to try and get to that interesting part of the conversation a little bit quicker. And I say a little bit quicker because what I mentioned earlier is that if we jump to it too quickly, it freaks the other person out. So a couple of ways that people often try. Some people try talking about themselves and their own interests, right? I could talk about emotional intelligence all day long and you could still be asleep and I'm still talking and it's still fine for me, right? Now, that's not particularly socially appropriate either. But what I found is that by mentioning a couple of the topics that I find interesting and noticing from the other person which ones they reacted to in a positive way, then I could steer the conversation into a topic that I'm actually interested in. And then at least I'm getting something out of it. And I find that when I tell people that I have a YouTube channel, or that I work in emotional intelligence and autism and teaching people about those things, very often people go, "Oh, that's interesting. Do you want to tell me more about that?" And I can actually share some of this passion that I've got within me for those topics, rather than holding it in and sticking to the most mundane small talk topics. So that often works. Another strategy is to try and sort of coax the other person out of this mundane script. And I find the best way to do that is to ask really gentle questions about the other person, because people in general really like to talk about themselves. And so if you can steer the conversation by getting the other person to talk a little bit about themselves, then hopefully they will disclose something that will be interesting to you, or a topic or a hobby or a past experience or something that I actually do have some kind of interest in. And when I hear that little nugget, I'm like, good, you're interested in this, I'm interested in this, we've found a point of common connection. Let's actually explore that in an interesting, engaging way, rather than just sticking to this really superficial level. I find that sometimes people do a really, really good job of pretending to be boring. And I almost feel like it's my job to trick them out of their facade so that they come to life, in a sense, and start talking about something that they're actually passionate or interested in. I'm not sure how many of you know this, but I used to be an aerospace engineer. I used to work doing design work for the 787 Dreamliner for Boeing. And after a while of that, I was really burnt out, and I took a massive break and I went traveling for a year and a half. So I spent 18 months going through Europe, which is a long way away from Australia, so felt exotic to me. Some people say, "Oh, you're from Australia, it's so far away." Yeah, for you it is. And so I was traveling every day for a year and a half. I would spend an average of about 3 or 4 days in each place. I saw over 30 countries, maybe 150 different cities that I stayed in, and met so many people, did so many things. And when I came home, I would ask people, "Wow, it's been so long, I haven't seen you. What's the news?" And they would say, "Oh, not much, nothing much." I'm like, are you serious? It's been a year and a half. We haven't been in contact at all. And the most interesting thing you can think of to tell me is not much has happened? surely something has happened in your life in the last year and a half that has been more exciting than not much. Maybe you chased a squirrel on the weekend. Maybe you bought a new CD, or maybe you watched a game of sport, maybe you've been following the cricket or something. I don't know, something. Surely something has happened that you would like to share with me and engage in an interesting way. And that was really frustrating because I found I got really pushed up against this barrier that a lot of people are just not really used to talking in that way, in a really engaging way. And anyone who's been traveling, firstly, you'll know the really annoying question, oh, where have you been? Or similar questions, and you can probably predict the first 3 or 4 questions that anyone's going to ask you when you're traveling. And that's almost like that version of small talk. But the point is that after that, it gets interesting because you start to get to know the person. So in that sense, small talk is almost like the getting to know you phase, so that you get a sense of who the other person is, and then you can actually get into something more significant. In that sense, it can be a really safe place because you know what's going to happen. How I learned a lot of my social skills was when I was a teenager. I got dreadlocks, right? Check out my dreadlock story videos if you want to hear more about that. And what I found is, because all of a sudden I had a hairstyle that was quite uncommon, in my friendship group and the people I was around, everyone who wanted to talk to me had a talking point. They could come up to me and ask me about my hair. And what I found is that suddenly I was being invited to parties, and suddenly people were talking to me, and I found I was having the same conversation over and over and over and over and over again. And actually, for me at the time, that wasn't a bad thing, because it meant that I was safe. It meant that I knew what was going to happen. I was confident that I could be in a room full of people that I might be too scared to talk to, think social anxiety 16-year-old here, right? And it would be okay because we've got this kind of back and forth social dance that is relatively pleasant, that other people enjoy. I get to know someone else, and it allows us to get over that first step. It breaks the ice, for lack of a better word. So I think thinking about this as a dance is a metaphor that I use a lot in my relationship coaching. And when you're doing a dance with somebody and sometimes the easiest way is to do one that you both know the moves to, because it's really simple and it's actually not all that involved. So small talk, where the same person asks you the same question every single time, that's one of the reasons that it's such a common phenomenon in social life. That said, I've found that the general neurotypical population get a lot more, like they feel a lot better about small talk than someone like me. So I essentially see small talk as a necessary evil to break the ice with someone and find some common ground and get to the interesting stuff, whereas other people will often just be happy to stay at that superficial level, and they're already getting all the social interaction they need. So especially in big groups, for example, it's easy to spend 2 minutes talking to one person and then 2 minutes talking to someone else, and 2 minutes, and then you're having the same conversation every 2 minutes for the duration of a social event. Now, if that's not the definition of boredom, then I don't know what is. So maybe I'll leave it there for today, but that's some of why small talk can feel like a death sentence, because if you're trapped in that place and there's no way out, then that little spark of creativity in you that just wants to share your passion and actually engage and connect with somebody in an interesting way just sort of dies a little bit, and that's not really fun. So I've shared a few of my reflections on small talk today. I'm interested to hear your reflections as well, if this resonated for you, and what some of your strategies are, if you want to leave them in the comments. So thanks again to all the patrons who voted for this video. And if you'd like to become a financial supporter of this channel, you can become a cup of coffee patron for as little as $1 a week. So if you're able to do that, I would encourage you to do that. We're a fun little community. And I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you again next week. Bye.